Today we're going to be diving into the cutting-edge firepower of the Drak Plasma Carbine. This is Scout's third primary weapon, so let's jump right into the pros and the cons of the Drak Plasma Carbine. So for the general pros of this weapon, it has good damage per second, it usually has a lot of ammo, this kind of depends on the overclock that you're running, and it has some splash damage on there too. You do kind of have to enable this, but this works really well as a crowd control option, which Scout doesn't really have with their other primary weapons. Not saying that the other two are bad or anything, it's just this one probably has the most. This one's also really good if you're missing a lot of shots on something like Swarmers. Major cons to this is that it doesn't have as much single target damage as the other two options that Scout has, and it also has projectiles that have a travel time. So if you're using this at very long range, sometimes at longer ranges it can be a bit difficult to actually hit your targets. Let's hop right into a vanilla build for the Drak, and for this we are once again going to be using Karl.gg, which is a fantastic website to show off plenty of builds. So in tier 1 for the Drak, our options are increased rate of fire, reduced heat, or projectile speed. Generally I would go with the reduced heat here, that way we can shoot the Drak more often without it overheating. Since the Drak never needs to reload, we just have to keep an eye on the temperature gauge and make sure that we're not overheating it too much. In tier 2 we either have ammo or more damage. I'll generally go with more ammo here just so that I can use this more often. It's really nice to have a Scout build that actually has a bunch of bullets, and the Drak works really well for that role. In tier 3 we have reduced vertical and horizontal spread, faster cooldowns, and then hot feet, which makes it so when we overheat the Drak then we can move 50% faster for 2 seconds. If you're having a lot of trouble with the Drak actually overheating, hot feet is not a bad option to go for here. Usually I'll just go with the cooling system though, that way it cools down quicker too, so I can be shooting longer during a fight, and I can also make sure that the heat goes down faster so that I can stay in the fight. In tier 4 we have electricity chance. If you hit an enemy with this, there's a chance that it will put electricity on them and then it will deal damage over time as well as slow them like electricity does. You have the plasma splash. This reduces your direct damage but it increases area damage, and it makes it so every ball actually can splash onto enemies. This one can be really good if you're going on like Swarmageddon. And then we have armor breaking as our third option. Generally here I will go with increased electricity because this will get us more damage and the slowdown effect is very nice. It also synergizes really well with your secondaries, especially with the crossbow or with the Zukovs. Both of them are very good. If you're going on Swarmageddon though, I would recommend that you go with the plasma splash because that one is really nice for just clearing up swarmers. And then in tier 5 we have the manual heat dump. This makes it so once you get to 50% heat or above, you can then press your reload and you'll manually heat dump this, meaning that it will go all the way back down, but you will be overheated. And then we've got thermal feedback loop as our other option. This makes it so once we get past that 50% heat generation, then we start shooting faster. Usually I'll take the thermal feedback loop here just so that I can shoot faster, and since we're running all cooldown, it is much more easy to manage. We usually don't need to manually overheat this. Manually overheating it isn't a bad idea though. If once again you want to run hot feet, that can be really nice in this case, but this is my general go-to Drak build for dealing with most enemies. This works really well on most missions. You might want to switch it up slightly. If you're going on a Dreadnought mission, maybe take damage. If you're going on a Swarmageddon mission, maybe take the splash, but this build will get you through just about everything. As for secondary builds, if you want to go with the boomstick, I like running this build. This makes it so I can do really high damage at close and medium range. It pairs really well with the Drak, and then I just want to be fighting at that close and medium range pretty much the whole time. For the Zukovs, I'll usually go with this. This pairs really well with the Drak as well because it has electricity on it. Can pair even better if you want to take something like IFGs or boomerangs. That way you can just trigger the electricity and get even more damage out of this. You could also run more movement speed on this whenever you need to reload because that actually helps out with that too if you just want a really fast moving Scout. And then for the crossbow, I usually run even more electricity on this. This is really good for taking out big enemies and slowing them down. You can use the crossbow however you'd like though. Pretty much everything works with it and it's really flexible. So if you want to go with pheromone bolts, go for that. If you want to go for the more exploding bolts, you can go with that. With that out of the way, let's move on to the overclocks that you can run with this. And the Drak has some really cool overclocks that change it up quite a bit. So first up, let's go over the clean ones, and our very first one is called Aggressive Venting. Aggressive Venting makes it so whenever you overheat the Drak, you then deal fire damage to everything around you, and it also fears everything around you, assuming that you can light stuff on fire and assuming that you can fear them. If nothing else, this will build up a heat gauge on the enemy, so that's pretty nice. The higher the heat on the Drak, then the more fire damage you're going to deal, or the higher the heat gauge is going to be on the enemies. This one is incredibly strong. This is the way that I build it, and this is just to manually overheat it as often as possible, or to just keep shooting it until it overheats. This is really good. It does a lot of damage. It does a lot of damage per second, and it's really good for the crowd control. If you want a Scout primary weapon that is just for crowd control, this is probably the best option or one of the best options for it. It is a very strong build. Really, any of the secondaries work with this, but since you want to be up close and personal, pairing this with double barrel boomstick is super fun. It deals tons of damage. and you never really have to be out of very close range. You can also move incredibly fast with this, and so long as you're careful about the distance that you're staying away from the enemies, you can actually just stay basically on the front line the entire time, so long as you pay attention to what is actually surrounding you. This build is super fun and one of my absolute favorites for Scout. Our second clean overclock is probably the most straightforward for the Drak. This is thermal liquid coolant, and this just gets you a better cooling rate and less heat per shot. This is part of your tier 1 and part of your tier 3. I usually just run it the same way that I use my regular Drak, and this thing never overheats. You have so much cooldown on it and so little heat generated per shot. It is very strong. This is also super flexible. You can build it however you'd like. If you don't think that these are necessary, by all means switch them around. Since that one works so well for crowd control, I would recommend a high damage secondary. For me personally, I went with embedded detonators on the Zhukovs. These make it so I have explosive reload on them, and they work really well against big enemies. I'll just use the Drak for all the small enemies, save the Zhukovs for the bigger enemies. Plus, I get even more damage thanks to the electricity bonus on them too. And if you want to stack an IFG on this, it can kill big things really fast, which is very fun. Moving on to our balanced overclocks, our very first one is called Rewire Mod. Rewire Mod nerfs our overall ammo, as well as it increases our overall overheat duration, so when we do overheat the weapon, it takes longer for it to come back up. However, this does make it so every time that we do overheat our weapon, some of our ammo is refunded back to us. This one is probably Scout's most ammo efficient mod because you can keep firing this for an extremely long time with Scout. It takes forever for you to actually run out of shots with this. The way that I like building it is like this. This is slightly different and more to capitalize on that damage. You don't really need ammo in tier 2. I think damage is the better option here. And then you are going to be overheating this. And if you manually overheat this, you will still get some of the ammo refunded back to you. This one is really good if you want to be taking it on longer missions, and especially on like deep dives, it can be kind of nice if you worry about running out of resources, because you likely won't need to have very many resupplies in order to get a lot of value from this. It can be very awkward on missions where you're trying to hold the objective though, because a lot of the time you are going to be overheating this, which means there's less time for you to actually be in the fight. That's okay though, you can take a secondary that makes up for that. I personally think that something like Firebolts is a fantastic addition to this loadout, since even if you can't be in fights very often, Firebolts can take care of whatever that you need to hit. This one does run Pheromone Bolts, it's very strong, you just shoot a Pheromone Bolt into something big, fire a Firebolt or two into it, and it should light up everything in the nearby area. Then you can always switch back to your Drak and just keep spraying that until you need to reload it. Swap back and forth between these as needed. Next up is one of my favorite overclocks. This is Impact Deflection. This is also a balanced overclock. It used to be a clean overclock and it used to be stronger. This makes so whenever you're shooting the Drak, your balls will then hit and then bounce once. This is pretty strong because you can hit multiple enemies or hit the same enemy multiple times with the single ball of this. This does nerf your rate of fire, which is sad because when it was a clean overclock, it didn't actually do that, and it also bounced twice, which made it incredibly strong. Kind of a little bit too strong, so I do understand why they moved it over to a balanced overclock. The way that I'm building this is the same as my usual Drak, although I do really like taking this for the splash damage, because you can hit next to something, splash damage to them, it can bounce and hit into them, and then splash again. So you essentially get 2 splashes and you can get more DPS. This one is really good if you hate Swarmageddon. Definitely try taking this one because it is fantastic for those type of roles. Since we're taking bouncy rounds on our primary, I really like taking bouncy rounds on the secondary. This is bodkin points on the crossbow. I have this set up to where it's pheromone bolts, although the magnetic shafts and the electricity is really good if you want more damage with this. And you could also put electricity on the Drak, assuming that you're probably not taking splash on it and you want to take it for something other than a Swarmageddon mission. This one is super fun, although not necessarily the strongest crossbow, nor the strongest Drak. This build will struggle with larger enemies. If you're going on like a Dreadnought mission, you probably won't want to be taking this. Maybe take something like Trifork Volley. That is a whole lot better of an option. And we move on to the newest overclock, which is Conductive Thermals, and this one is really strong right now. It's been strong since it came out, and it's still kind of busted. So the way Conductive Thermals works is that you do less damage, and you generate more heat per shot, but this makes it so you apply a stack. This is indicated by the purple lightning on an enemy, and this makes it so elemental effects, at least electricity, fire, and ice, are all buffed up based on the amount of stacks that you have on that enemy. This is really strong in a team setting because you can stack it so quickly on certain enemies, and it makes it so you can freeze enemies incredibly fast, you can do even more electricity damage, and you can light any enemy on fire, even dreadnoughts. As well as the splash on this in tier 4 also makes it so that it stacks multiple times on the same enemy. That is kind of overpowered, and the devs have addressed that. They're saying that it shouldn't work that way, which Probably, because as of right now, it's really crazy. If you want to see something that's really insane, be sure to check out Drilling in the Name of's video when they were just trying to have the highest amount of damage. This overclock played a pretty big role in that. This is a really, really strong overclock right now. I'm sure it will be nerfed sometime in the future. Hopefully not in the time that I'm making this video, because there was a couple changes recently, but I don't think that this one got changed. So the way I'm building it is just like a normal Drak, just with the splash. I'd always recommend that you throw the splash on here, just because it stacks up the buff so much more. Secondary, you are going to want to have something with an elemental effect. For me, I'm taking cryo bolts with the crossbow. Fire bolts also work really well with this. Fire shotgun works, and cryo minelets also work. You could also go with electricity crossbow here. Just take anything that has elemental effects. It is very, very strong on really any mission that you want to go on. Next, we have Overtuned Particle Accelerator, our first unstable overclock. This gives us a whole lot more damage, 8 more base damage, about the same as its regular damage, but this does come at the downside of less ammo overall, more heat per shot, and a whole lot more spread. You really only want to be using this overclock at very close range. It can shred through things pretty fast if you are at those ranges, but outside of that, and if you're trying to use this at longer range, it is very awkward. So the way I have it built is the same as my standard Drak, where I just have more cooling on it, that way I don't overheat it as much. More ammo, although you could stack damage on this. That is really fun if you want to take it on a Dreadnought mission, although you will run through ammo fairly fast then. I would argue that this one is probably the best for armor breaking if you want to take that in tier 4, but I'm still taking electricity because I think that one is generally a little bit better. It's kind of nice to slow things down when your gun's kind of just going all over the place. And both options in tier 5 are a little bit awkward with this one, but I usually go with the increased rate of fire. This is a very fun overclock so long as you're okay at fighting at very close range. You probably want to go with a secondary that gives you at least some range. For me, I went with Shape Shells on the Boomstick. This is a fantastic overclock too. It nerfs our overall ammo, but it makes it so we have a very small spread, and it makes it so the shotgun is really good at long ranges now. It is surprisingly good. Even the base shotgun is sometimes weirdly accurate at long range. Running a pretty basic shotgun build, I usually go with more ammo here just so that I don't have to worry about running out of ammo so much with this and with my Drak, and then I just swap back and forth using the Drak at close range, using this at longer ranges, and it works pretty well against most enemies. Then we move on to one of the more strange overclocks that I've never been a super big fan of, although I know this one does have its fans. This is Shield Battery Booster. Shield Battery Booster is an unstable overclock that gives us a higher rate of fire, more ammo, and a better cooling rate, but more heat generated per shot. And then once our shields are full, we do get more direct damage, and we also get a higher velocity on every shot. However, once this overheats, it breaks your shield, whatever amount of shield you have, and it makes it so your shield takes longer to come up. This one is already kind of iffy, because if you're going into unknown missions, especially on deep dives, it's hard to tell whether or not you're going to get something like shield disruption. It's also not the greatest depending on which environment you're in, because something like Hollow Bow, it's really easy to take just little bits of chip damage from all the thorns sitting around. It's really easy to get poisoned in the fungus bogs. It's really easy to fall off of stuff and take a little bit of damage. It's really easy to get shot and take a little bit of damage. And if you're missing any part of your shield, you don't get the extra damage and extra velocity. Now, you'll always keep the extra ammo and the extra rate of fire, so that is pretty nice with the Drak. And the way I have it built is to kind of take advantage of when our shields are up. You also might want to go with the faster recharging shields as well on your suit for this one. But usually I just take this with heat reduction so I don't overheat it as much. More damage because you might as well max out the damage. We already have extra ammo. We don't necessarily need more. Electricity damage, although armor breaking is actually pretty decent on this one too. I'd argue that it's not really necessary, but this one is one of the better ones. The Plasma Splash is still really good for the Swarmers. And then the Manual Heat Dump is actually really good because you can overheat this whenever you'd like, and it will recharge your shield a little bit faster, which makes it kind of nice if you've already gotten hurt in a little bit during a fight, you killed something, then you overheat this, then you wait for your shield to come back up so that you can get right back into the fight, and you just try to stay safe while your shield is regenerating. This one's a little bit of an awkward one, but it can be pretty fun. Just make sure that you're not taking it on a shield disruption mission, or any mission where you think you're going to be taking constant damage. For a secondary weapon, I took the Zukovs with gas recycling, a really fun overclock that's very good at close and medium range, and it helps once my shield either breaks or my shields are kind of low. I can just use this to spray down enemies at close range. It's really good with the blow through rounds, and the armor shred on it is really nice. And then our last Drak overclock is the thermal exhaust feedback. This makes it so once our Drak starts hitting the yellow up to the orange into the red of the heat meter, we then get fire damage on, well, every shot. This is increased based on the amount of heat that you have. This does generate more heat, and it does make it so if you overheat your Drak, it takes longer for it to come back up. but lighting enemies on fire is really strong, and this is probably the best way to light things on fire with the Drak. Aggressive venting is fun for the AoE, but it's not the most consistent for actually getting things on fire. This is also a bit safer, and you can stack this with the electricity as well, which makes it pretty strong. The way I have it built is like this. I do like going at the increased velocity here, that way I can actually hit targets more at a distance. Generating less heat per shot makes this a little bit easier, but I also don't find it as useful as just the cooling. So I would recommend that you either take the cooling or the less heat generation in tiers 1 and 3, but not really both. Otherwise you get into kind of an awkward spot. And this one's actually a pretty strong overclock for the Drak because it doesn't really come with much of a downside, and being able to light enemies on fire at a distance is very useful, especially if you want to take this on like robot missions where you can just destroy them super easy. For a secondary, you can really pair this with anything, and I decided to pair it with Special Powder for the Boomstick, one of my absolute favorite overclocks, and probably everybody's favorite overclock for the Boomstick. This one, very straightforward, I'm just running extra ammo on it, nothing crazy there. I'm going to be using this at close and medium range because this doesn't actually nerf the boomstick in any way. It just makes it so that when I jump into the air I can fling myself, and that is super useful so long as I get a big open cave. Hope this video helped you out with some builds for the Drak. Next up we're going to be taking a look at the Loki, and it actually got one of its overclocks reworked recently, so that's going to be something interesting to test. Thank you guys so very much for watching this. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll see you next time. Bye bye!